Her small hands trembled as she clutched the stranger's sleeve. Tears carved rivers down her flushed cheeks, her voice breaking with every desperate word. "They took my mama." The opulent restaurant went deathly still. Wine glasses froze midair. Every conversation died. Even the soft piano melody seemed to choke on its own notes. But the man this terrified child had latched onto was no ordinary stranger. He was Alex, the tattooed king who ruled the city's underworld with an iron fist. A man whose very presence made dangerous men lower their eyes. And what he did next would shake the entire criminal underworld to its foundation. Stay with me until the end, because this story will leave you breathless. Underscore 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 underscore. Before we begin, I need you to do something important. You see, there are people out there just like the vultures in this story, people who prey on the vulnerable, who think no one's watching, who believe they can get away with anything. But here's the truth. The more people who know these stories, the more awareness we create, the harder it becomes for real-world predators to operate in the shadows. So hit that subscribe button right now. Like this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because every subscription, every share, every comment where you're watching from, it's not just support for this channel. It's a message that we're paying attention, that we won't look away, that we refuse to let evil win in silence. Don't let the vultures of this world count on your silence. Subscribe now, and let's get into it. Underscore 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 underscore. It was a frost-kissed Thursday evening in the heart of the city, late November 2019. The velvet crown thrummed with the carefully orchestrated energy of men conducting business that would never see the light of day. Crystal chandeliers cast molten gold light across pristine white tablecloths and untouched glasses of bourbon worth more than most people's car payments. A pianist played Chopin just loud enough to mask conversations, but quiet enough that a raised voice would be noticed immediately. This wasn't just any establishment. This was Alex's throne room. Every server had been trained to observe nothing and remember less. Every patron understood the invisible rules. Eyes down, voices low, business private. You paid your respects at the entrance. You never interrupted. And you absolutely, under no circumstances whatsoever, caused a scene. Alex occupied the center table, not hidden in some shadowy corner like most crime lords, but positioned where he could survey his entire empire with a single glance. At just 34 years old, he had already built a criminal network that stretched across 3 states. But it wasn't his youth that made him legendary. It wasn't even his ruthlessness, though that was considerable. It was the mark he wore openly, an intricate serpent tattoo that coiled around his neck, its scales seeming to shimmer when he moved, its fanged head resting just below his jawline. The ink was both mesmerizing and terrifying, a permanent declaration that Alex saw everything, forgot nothing, and granted mercy to no one who crossed him. His dark hair was slicked back with precision. His sharp features could have graced magazine covers. His tailored black suit fit like a second skin. He looked more like a CEO than a criminal. But his eyes, cold, calculating, perpetually assessing, told the real story. This was a man who had survived attempts on his life before he turned 21 and emerged stronger each time. Tonight, like every Thursday for the past 4 years, he was conducting his weekly summit with his inner circle. Dominic handled operations. Vincent managed enforcement. Leo served as head of security. The conversation flowed in measured tones, shipments discussed, territories negotiated, problems addressed with surgical precision. Everything in Alex's world operated like a Swiss watch, efficient, profitable, and completely under his control. He had just lifted a glass of single malt scotch to his lips when the impossible happened. The heavy oak doors burst open with such force that the brass handles struck the walls. Cold November wind swept into the warm sanctuary of the Velvet Crown, extinguishing candles and sending cocktail napkins spiraling through the air like panicked birds. The head waiter lunged forward, his face draining of all color, hands outstretched to intercept whatever disaster had just violated the sanctity of Alex's domain. But he was far too slow. A blur of dark green velvet shot past him like a hunted animal, small feet slapping against polished marble, leaving wet prints in her desperate wake. Conversations ceased mid-word. Silverware clattered against fine china. Even the pianist in the corner missed a note, his fingers stumbling across the keys in shock. She was so small, maybe 7 years old, with light brown hair plastered to her tear-stained face. Her green dress with its delicate lace collar, the kind a loving mother carefully selects for special occasions, was torn at the sleeve and streaked with something dark that definitely wasn't rainwater. Dirt smudged her pale cheeks. Her white lace collar hung askew. She looked like she'd run through the gates of hell itself to reach this place. And perhaps she had. The visual contrast was jarring, almost sacrilegious. This tiny, innocent thing in her Sunday best, surrounded by 50 men in $1,000 suits, men whose hands had signed death sentences and whose pockets held weapons instead of family photos. It was wrong on every conceivable level. A lamb stumbling into a den of wolves. Vincent moved first, his security instincts overriding his shock. His hand disappeared inside his jacket, fingers finding the grip of his concealed weapon. Dominic rose from his chair, positioning himself between the child and Alex. Leo's hand shot out to grab her, to stop this unprecedented security breach before their boss could interpret it as disrespect. But the little girl was faster than all of them, driven by a desperation that obliterated fear. She dodged Leo's reaching hand with the instinct of prey, stumbled past Dominic's blocking form, and threw herself directly at Alex's table with such force that she nearly knocked over his scotch. Her small hands, so impossibly small, latched onto the sleeve of his custom-tailored jacket. Her fingers gripped the expensive fabric with the strength of absolute terror. And then she looked up. Her eyes, red-rimmed, overflowing with tears, filled with a hope so fragile it could shatter at a single word, locked onto his. "They took my mama," Diana Wright sobbed, her voice cracking like breaking glass. "Please, they took my mama, and they're going to hurt her." The entire Velvet Crown held its breath. 50 dangerous men watched a child clutch their king's jacket, watched her tears fall onto marble worth more than her mother's monthly salary, watched her body shake with exhaustion and terror and hope. And they watched Alex, because what he did next would set the tone for everything that followed. Leo reached for Diana again, more forcefully this time. "Boss, I'll remove her." "Don't." The single word cut through the air, like a blade. Leo's hand froze mid-reach. Alex hadn't raised his voice. He never needed to. But something in that one syllable made every man in the room understand that the order was absolute. Slowly, deliberately, Alex set down his scotch glass. The ice clinked softly, the only sound in the cavernous silence. Then he did something no one had ever seen him do in this place, not once in 4 years of weekly meetings. He moved from his throne. Alex pushed back his chair and stood, his tall frame unfolding with predatory grace. The serpent on his neck seemed to coil tighter. His cold eyes, which had stared down rivals and never blinked, settled on the tiny girl still clutching his jacket. And then he did something even more shocking. He knelt. The king of the underworld, the man who made hardened criminals avoid eye contact, the one person in the city who never bowed to anyone, he lowered himself to one knee so he could look Diana right in the eyes. "Tell me everything," Alex said, his voice quieter now but no less intense. "Who took your mama? When? Where?" Diana's sobs caught in her throat. She hadn't expected this. She'd expected to be thrown out, ignored, dismissed as just another problem in a city full of problems. But this man, this terrifying man with the snake wrapped around his throat, was listening. And for the first time since she'd watched her mother get dragged into that black van, Diana Wright felt the tiniest spark of hope ignite in her chest. What happens next is a collision of two worlds that should never have touched. A desperate child with nowhere else to turn, and a criminal mastermind who thought he'd buried his humanity so deep it could never resurface. This is the story of how a monster remembered what it means to protect. This is the story of how a child's tears brought an empire to war. This is the story of what happens when even the devil himself discovers a line he will not let anyone cross. And it all begins with 4 desperate words. They took my mama. Underscore 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 underscore. Diana's words tumbled out in broken fragments, each sentence interrupted by gasping sobs that shook her entire body. Alex remained kneeling, one hand raised to keep his men at bay, while the other rested on the edge of the table, steady and patient. The entire restaurant remained frozen in that impossible tableau, hardened criminals watching their boss crouch before a child like a priest taking confession. They came in a black van. Diana choked out, her small hands still death-gripping Alex's jacket sleeve. 3 men, maybe 4. They wore masks, black ones that covered everything except their eyes. She wiped her nose with the back of her hand, streaking dirt across her face. Mama was closing the flower shop. I was supposed to wait inside, but I saw them grab her through the window. Vincent shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable with how exposed Alex was in this position. Dominic's jaw tightened with each passing second. Leo's hand remained near his weapon, his eyes scanning the room for any threat that might exploit this moment of vulnerability. But Alex didn't move. His cold eyes stayed locked on Diana's face, taking in every detail, the way her pupils were dilated with fear, how her breathing came in sharp, shallow bursts, the tremor in her lips that suggested she was minutes away from complete collapse. "What time?" Alex asked, his voice quiet but commanding. 5 o'clock, maybe 5:15. Diana's voice cracked. I tried to scream, but one of them looked at me through the window and put his finger to his lips like this. She demonstrated, pressing her small finger against her mouth. Like it was a game. Like taking my mama was funny. Something flickered across Alex's face, so brief that most men in the room missed it entirely. But Dominic saw it. He'd known Alex for 15 years, had watched him build this empire from nothing, had seen him order executions without blinking. But he'd never seen that particular expression before. It looked almost like recognition, like pain. "How did you find me?" Alex asked. Diana's tears flowed faster now, exhaustion finally catching up with desperation. "Mrs. Chun, she owns the restaurant next door. She said if anyone could help it would be the man at the Velvet Crown. She said you were dangerous, but you had rules. She said you don't hurt mothers." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "She said you protect people sometimes. When it matters." Alex's expression remained unreadable, but his fingers tightened almost imperceptibly against the table edge. Behind him, Vincent muttered something under his breath about civilians talking too much. "So, I ran," Diana continued. "I ran all the way here. It took forever and my legs hurt, and I'm not supposed to be out after dark, but I didn't know what else to do. The police." Her voice broke completely. "Mama always said we can't go to the police. She said they don't help people like us." The bitter truth of that statement hung in the air. Everyone in the room knew she was right. In this neighborhood, in this city, the police were either corrupt or indifferent, and people like Joyce Wright, working class, invisible, struggling, fell through every crack in the system. "Please." Diana's voice barely rose above a whisper now. Her strength was failing, adrenaline giving way to pure exhaustion. "Please, I don't have anyone else. I don't have money or anything to give you, but please. They're going to hurt her. I know they are. Please." Alex studied her for a long moment, This tiny girl in her torn Sunday dress who had somehow made it past his security, through his doors, and directly to his table through sheer force of will. Who had looked at the most dangerous man in the city and seen not a monster, but a chance. He'd built his entire empire on the principle that emotions were weakness. That caring about anyone made you vulnerable. That the only way to survive in his world was to bury everything soft and human so deep it could never surface. But as he looked into Diana Wright's desperate, pleading eyes, Alex felt something he hadn't experienced in over a decade, something he'd thought he'd successfully killed years ago. He felt responsible. Slowly, deliberately, Alex reached up and gently loosened Diana's grip on his jacket. Her eyes widened with panic, thinking he was rejecting her, pushing her away like everyone else had. But instead of standing and walking away, he took both of her small hands in his own. "Sit down," he said quietly, gesturing to the empty chair beside his. "You're going to tell me everything. Every detail you remember. The van's color, the men's voices, which direction they drove. Everything." Diana's mouth opened in shock. "You'll help?" Alex's eyes hardened, not at her, but at whoever had been foolish enough to take a mother in his city. "I'm going to find your mama," he said, his voice carrying that particular tone that made grown men reconsider their life choices. "And the men who took her are going to wish they'd never been born." For the first time since bursting through those doors, Diana Wright smiled. Diana's voice faded into background noise as Alex's mind dragged him backward through time. He tried to focus on her words. The details mattered. Every second counted. But her description kept triggering memories he'd spent 2 decades trying to bury. "The van had dark windows," Diana was saying, her small voice growing steadier now that someone was finally listening. "And there was a symbol on the side, like a bird, but scary, with its wings spread out. A vulture." Alex's blood went cold. 20 years ago, he'd been 12 years old, standing in an alley behind his mother's seamstress shop. He remembered the black van pulling up. Remembered his mother, Elena, stepping outside to lock the door. Remembered the men in masks. He'd hidden behind a dumpster like a coward while they grabbed her. Watched through the gap as she screamed his name. Saw the symbol painted on the van side, a vulture with spread wings. He'd run to find help. By the time anyone believed him, by the time anyone cared enough to look, she was gone. They found her body 3 weeks later in a warehouse by the docks. "Mr. Alex?" Diana's small hand touched his wrist, pulling him back to the present. "Are you okay?" Alex blinked, realizing his jaw had clenched so hard his teeth ached. He forced his expression back to neutral, but it was too late. Dominic had seen it. His second-in-command's eyes narrowed with concern and something else, recognition. Dominic had been there that night 20 years ago. He'd been 15, already running with Alex's older brother's crew. He'd watched 12-year-old Alex transform from a scared kid into something harder, colder, more focused. He'd watched the boy bury his grief and his mother and his humanity all in the same dark hole. And now, across the table, Dominic saw that burial ground cracking open. "Keep going," Alex said to Diana, his voice rougher than before. "Tell me about your mother. What does she do? Where does she work?" "She has a flower shop on Maple Street. Joyce's Flowers. She makes arrangements for weddings and funerals." Diana's eyes welled up again. "She's really good at it. People come from all over because she makes them so beautiful. She was working on a big order tonight, roses for someone's anniversary." Joyce Wright, a florist, a single mother working late to make ends meet. Someone who probably never hurt anyone in her entire life. Just like Elena had been. Just like his mother. The parallels were suffocating. A working mother. A child watching helplessly. A black van. The same goddamn symbol. Even the time of day matched, that cursed hour between closing time and darkness, when the streets emptied and predators emerged. "Boss." Vincent's voice carried a note of uncertainty. "Should I call everyone?" Alex interrupted, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against marble. "I want every available man on this. Every contact, every informant, every pair of eyes we have on the street. Dominic rose as well, already pulling out his phone, but his eyes never left Alex's face. You sure about this? The question carried weight beyond the obvious. They both knew what he was really asking. Are you sure you want to open this door? Are you sure you want to feel this again? Alex's hand unconsciously went to his neck, fingers brushing the serpent tattoo that concealed older scars. Scars from the night he'd tried to fight the men who killed his mother and nearly died for it. Scars that reminded him why he'd chosen to become something feared rather than something vulnerable. I'm sure, Alex said, and his voice carried a tone Dominic hadn't heard in years. Not the cold calculation of a crime lord making a business decision. Not the detached cruelty of a man ordering punishment. This was something raw. Something personal. This was the voice of a 12-year-old boy who'd failed to save his mother, speaking through the mouth of a 34-year-old man who now had the power to save someone else's. The vultures took her, Alex continued, his eyes hardening into something that made even Vincent take a step back. The same organization that's been trying to establish operations in our territory. The same animals who think they can operate here without consequences. He looked down at Diana, who was watching him with wide, hopeful eyes. They made a mistake, Alex said quietly. They took the wrong mother, in the wrong city, at the wrong time. Dominic saw it then, the shift, the transformation. His boss wasn't just helping a desperate child anymore. Alex was going to war. Diana watched in stunned silence as Alex pulled out his phone, not a smartphone like everyone else carried, but something sleeker, more secure, the kind of device that couldn't be traced or tapped. He pressed a single button and brought it to his ear. It's me, Alex said, his voice cold and precise. I need everything. Full mobilization. Now. He didn't need to say more. On the other end, his communications director would already be setting wheels in motion that would ripple across the entire city within minutes. Black van, dark windows, vulture insignia on the side. Target is Joyce Wright, female, mid-30s, florist. Taken from Maple Street at approximately 17:15 hours. Suspects are connected to the vulture's trafficking ring. Alex's eyes never left Diana as he spoke. I want street cameras pulled. I want every informant on the docks activated. I want our people in the police department to flag any reports. And I want Nikolai to start scanning police radio frequencies. He paused, listening. No, he said firmly. This isn't a favor. This isn't a negotiation. This is priority alpha. Anyone who finds useful information gets a $20,000 bonus. Anyone who finds her location gets 50. Spread the word. He ended the call and immediately began typing on the device. Within seconds, messages were being dispatched to every corner of his network. Dominic was already on his own phone, coordinating with their street-level contacts. Vincent had moved to the corner of the room, speaking in rapid-fire instructions to their security team. Leo appeared at Alex's side with a tablet. Boss, I'm pulling up our asset map. Where do you want eyes first? Start with the warehouse district by the eastern docks. That's their usual territory. Then expand to any properties that changed hands in the last 6 months, shell companies, cash purchases, anything that might be a front. Alex glanced down at Diana, who was watching this controlled chaos with something between fear and awe. And get Marcus from tech support to hack into the traffic camera system. I want every black van that moved through Maple Street between 5 and 6 o'clock tonight. Diana tugged on his sleeve. There's more, she said quietly. Alex knelt again, bringing himself to her eye level. The restaurant was now a command center, men speaking in hushed urgency, phones pressed to ears, tablets glowing with maps and data. But he gave Diana his complete attention. Tell me. The bad men, they were watching us before. For days. Diana's voice trembled. Mama didn't think I noticed, but I did. There was a car across from the shop. Different men, but they just sat there, watching. One of them took pictures. Alex's jaw tightened. This wasn't random. This was planned. Calculated. They'd been surveilling Joyce, which meant they wanted her specifically, or more likely, she'd witnessed something she wasn't supposed to see. What kind of car? Gray. 4 doors. One of the windows had a crack in it, like a spider web. Diana closed her eyes, trying to remember. And the man with the camera had red hair. I remember because it was really bright, like my teacher, Miss Robertson's. Good girl, Alex said, and he meant it. Most adults couldn't recall details like that under stress. What else can you tell me about your mama? Does she have any enemies? Anyone who might want to hurt her? Diana shook her head vigorously. No, never. Mama's nice to everyone. She gives flowers to the homeless people sometimes. She helps Mrs. Patterson downstairs with her groceries. Her voice cracked. Why would anyone want to hurt her? Because the world is cruel and random and good people suffer for no reason at all, Alex thought but didn't say. Instead, he asked, did your mama mention seeing anything unusual recently? Maybe at the shop or on the street? Diana's eyes widened with sudden recollection. Last week. She came home really upset. She wouldn't tell me why, but she was on the phone with someone, saying she didn't want to get involved, that she didn't see anything, that she just wanted to be left alone. There it was. The motive. Joyce had witnessed something, likely related to the Vulture's operations. Maybe a pickup, maybe a drop-off, maybe even an abduction. And she tried to stay silent, tried to protect herself and her daughter by keeping her head down. But silence hadn't saved her. Dominic appeared at Alex's shoulder. We've got something. Traffic camera caught a black van with a Vulture emblem heading east on Commerce Avenue at 1723. It turned toward the industrial district. Alex stood, his hand resting briefly on Diana's shoulder. Good. Get our teams converging on that area. I want blueprints of every building within a 2-mile radius of that last sighting. Boss, Vincent called from across the room. What about the girl? All eyes turned to Diana, who suddenly looked very small and very alone in her torn green dress. Alex looked down at her, at this child who'd run through the city in the dark to find help from a monster because she had nowhere else to turn. She stays with me, he said simply. Until we get her mother back. She doesn't leave my sight. 2 hours later, Alex sat in his private office on the 3rd floor of the Velvet Crown, his eyes locked on the screen in front of him. Diana had finally succumbed to exhaustion 20 minutes ago, curled up on the leather couch against the wall, a blanket that Leo had retrieved draped over her small frame. Her face was still streaked with dried tears, even in sleep. Marcus, his tech expert, stood beside the desk, fingers flying across a laptop keyboard. The man was 32, rail-thin, with perpetually bloodshot eyes from staring at screens for 18 hours a day. He was also the best digital forensics specialist money could buy, legal or otherwise. Got it, Marcus said, his voice hoarse from too much coffee and not enough sleep. This is the feed from Maple Street, 4 days ago. Watch the timestamp at 14:23. The surveillance footage showed Joyce's flower shop from across the street. The image quality was grainy but functional, good enough to make out faces and license plates. Joyce appeared in frame, stepping outside to water the plants she kept on the sidewalk display. She was exactly as Diana had described, kind-faced, gentle movements, completely absorbed in her work. Then a white cargo van pulled up 3 shops down. 2 men got out, both wearing casual clothes that looked deliberately nondescript. They moved with purpose toward the building next to Joyce's shop, a currently vacant storefront that used to house a dry cleaner. She's not paying attention yet, Marcus narrated. She's focused on the flowers. But watch. The men opened the van's rear doors. A 3rd man emerged from the vacant building, and between them, they carried something wrapped in a tarp. Not something. Someone. Alex could see the shape struggling, see the bulge where a head would be, the frantic movements of someone bound and gagged. And then Joyce looked up. The footage captured the exact moment she saw them. Her hands froze mid-watering. The can tilted, spilling water onto the sidewalk. She stood there for maybe 3 seconds too long, just staring as they loaded their captive into the van. One of the men turned, made direct eye contact with Joyce across the distance. She immediately looked away, going back to her flowers with jerky, panicked movements, pretending she hadn't seen, playing the smart civilian who knew better than to witness what she'd just witnessed. But it was too late. The man who saw her, Alex said quietly, his voice deadly calm. Zoom in on his face. Marcus clicked several keys. The image pixelated, then sharpened. The man had a thin face, a scar across his left eyebrow, and eyes that held nothing but cold calculation. His name is Sergio Vance, Dominic said from the doorway, where he'd been watching in silence. He's second in command of the Vulture's local operations. Enforcer type. No constraints, no limits. And he saw her, Alex said, more to himself than anyone else. He knew she'd seen them take someone. So they kept watching her, making sure she didn't go to the police. And when they were satisfied she was staying quiet, they decided she was still too much of a risk. It gets worse, Marcus said, pulling up another window. I traced the van's route after they took the first victim. Want to guess where it ended up? The warehouse district, Alex said. Pier 17 specifically. An old fish processing plant that's been abandoned for 2 years. Public records show it was purchased 8 months ago by a shell company registered in Delaware. Marcus pulled up property records. That shell company has connections to 3 other properties, all purchased within the last year, all in industrial areas, all currently vacant. Alex leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled beneath his chin. The pieces were coming together with sickening clarity. The Vultures weren't just operating in his city, they'd been establishing infrastructure, building a pipeline. The abandoned fish processing plant would be perfect for their operations. Isolated, large enough to hold multiple captives, close enough to the port for easy transport. And Joyce Wright had seen them at work, had witnessed them kidnapping someone right in broad daylight. She'd tried to protect herself by staying silent, by pretending she saw nothing, by going about her life and hoping they'd forget about her. But organizations like the Vultures didn't forget. They eliminated loose ends. How long has she been there? Alex asked. Marcus checked his notes. Based on the traffic camera timeline, the van arrived at Pier 17 at 1742. It's now 1953. So a little over 2 hours. 2 hours. Long enough to interrogate her. Long enough to terrify her. Long enough to make her understand what happened to people who saw too much. What are the chances she's still alive? Vincent asked from his position by the window. Dominic and Alex exchanged a look. They both knew the answer. If the Vultures were smart, they'd have eliminated Joyce immediately. Clean, quick, professional. But traffickers weren't always smart. Sometimes they were cruel.
Sometimes they took their time.
Sometimes people survived long enough to be rescued. We move now, Alex said, standing abruptly. The chair rolled back and hit the bookshelf with a soft thud. Diana stirred on the couch but didn't wake. Marcus, I want complete blueprints of that fish processing plant. All entry points, all exit points, all potential hiding spots. Dominic, mobilize the assault team. Full tactical gear. Vincent, arrange for medical support on standby. He walked to the window, looking out over the city lights. Somewhere out there, Joyce Wright was probably praying for a miracle she didn't think would come. She was wrong. The interrogation room beneath the velvet crown smelled like concrete and fear. Alex had used this space exactly 7 times in 4 years, reserved only for situations that required absolute discretion and undeniable results. Tonight made 8. The man zip-tied to the metal chair was named Paolo Restrepo, a low-level courier for the Vultures who'd made the unfortunate decision to pick up his girlfriend from a bar in Alex's territory. Vincent had snatched him off the street 15 minutes ago, and now Paolo sat sweating under the single bare bulb, his eyes darting between Alex and Dominic like a cornered animal. I don't know anything, I swear, Paolo stammered, his accent thick with panic. I just deliver packages. I don't ask questions. I don't. Alex held up a single finger.
Paolo esse mouth snapped shut.
Let me explain how this works, Alex said, his voice conversational, almost friendly. I'm going to ask you questions. You're going to answer them truthfully and completely. If you lie to me, if you waste my time, if you tell me you don't know when you actually do, he let the sentence hang, unfinished but perfectly clear. Paolo's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. A woman was taken tonight. Joyce Wright. Where does your organization hold people before transport? I really don't. Paolo stopped when he saw Alex's expression shift, something predatory sliding behind those cold eyes. Okay. There's a place. The old fish plant on Pier 17. That's where they keep them before the ships come. How long do they usually hold captives there? Depends. Sometimes a few hours if there's a ship ready. Sometimes a couple days if they're waiting for the right buyer or the right transport window. Paolo's words came faster now, self-preservation overriding loyalty. But never more than 72 hours. After that it gets too risky. Too many chances for someone to find them or for the captives to cause problems. Alex felt his jaw tighten. 72 hours. 3 days. But Joyce had only been taken a few hours ago, which meant, when's the next transport? Paolo's eyes widened. There's a cargo ship, the Meridian Star. It docks tomorrow night at 2200 hours. That's when they usually move people. The ship's manifest lists machine parts, but there are modified containers below deck. He was talking rapidly now, desperate to prove his usefulness. They'll process everyone they have and load them onto that ship. Once it leaves port, those people are gone. Disappeared. They end up in places where nobody asks questions. 36 hours. That's all the time they had. Dominic's hand clenched into a fist. How many people are we talking about? How many captives are in that facility right now? I don't know exactly. Maybe 10? 15? They've been collecting for the past 2 weeks, waiting for this shipment. Paolo looked between them, seeing something in their expressions that made him even more nervous. Look, I'm just telling you what I know. I'm not involved in the actual operations. Who runs security at the fish plant? Alex interrupted. Sergio Vance during operational hours. At night, there's usually 4 or 5 guards. Maybe more if they're expecting trouble. The place is built like a fortress, one way in by land, surrounded by water on 3 sides. They've got cameras, motion sensors, the works. Alex absorbed this information with the calm of a man calculating odds and consequences. 5 guards minimum, possibly more. A fortified position. Limited entry points. And somewhere inside, Joyce Wright, and at least a dozen other innocent people waiting to be erased from existence. Boss, Dominic said quietly, stepping closer. We need to talk about this. Alex nodded to Vincent, who hauled Paolo to his feet and dragged him toward a reinforced door at the back of the room. They'd keep him isolated until this was over, couldn't risk him warning his employers. Once they were alone, Dominic's careful composure cracked. You know what this means, right? If we hit that facility, if we take out Vance and his men, the vultures won't just let it go. This isn't some small-time crew. They're connected to cartels in 3 countries. They've got resources, manpower, political protection. I know, Alex said simply. This could start a war. An actual war. Our operations, our territory, our people. Everything we've built could be at risk. Dominic's voice carried the weight of years of friendship, of battles fought side by side. I'll follow you into hell if that's where you're going. You know I will. But I need you to tell me you've thought this through. That this isn't just about my mother? Alex finished. You think I'm making this decision because of Elena? I think you're making this decision because of a little girl sleeping upstairs who reminds you of yourself 20 years ago. Dominic met his eyes steadily. And I think you're right to make it. But we need to go in smart. We need a real plan. Alex walked to the metal table against the wall where Marcus had laid out the blueprints of the fish processing plant. The building was massive, a relic from when the fishing industry thrived in this city. Multiple levels, dozens of rooms, countless places to hide hostages or stage ambushes. We go in at 0400 hours. Before dawn, when they're tired and complacent. Alex's finger traced the main entrance. 2 teams. Dominic, you lead the extraction team, find Joyce and the other captives, get them out. I'll lead the assault team, we neutralize the guards, secure the perimeter, and make sure nobody calls for backup. What about Vance? Alex's smile was cold and sharp as a knife. Vance is mine. How many men? 12. Our best. Nobody green, nobody reckless. I want people who can follow orders and adapt when plans go sideways. Alex looked up from the blueprints. And, Dominic? Bring enough firepower to make a statement. The vultures need to understand what happens when they operate in my city. Dominic studied his boss for a long moment, then slowly nodded. I'll make the calls. We move in 5 hours. The armored SUVs idled in the underground garage, engines rumbling like caged beasts. Alex's assault team moved with practiced efficiency, checking weapons, adjusting tactical vests, reviewing the operation timeline one final time. The clock on the wall read 3:17. They'd move out in 13 minutes. Alex had changed from his tailored suit into black tactical gear, the serpent tattoo on his neck now accompanied by Kevlar and ammunition. He'd made this transformation countless times before, from businessman to soldier, from crime lord to warrior. But tonight felt different. Tonight the weight of what he was about to do pressed against his chest like a physical thing. He took the stairs back up to his office 2 at a time. Diana needed to be relocated before they left. He'd arranged for Mrs. Kowalski, his housekeeper, to take her to a secure apartment across town. The older woman was already waiting, her weathered face creased with concern but her eyes steady. She'd worked for Alex for 6 years and knew better than to ask questions. Diana was awake when he entered, sitting on the couch with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Her eyes were red-rimmed but alert, and she watched him with an intensity that seemed too old for her 7 years. You're going to get her, Diana said. It wasn't a question. Yes, Alex replied, walking to his desk to retrieve his primary weapon. Mrs. Kowalski is going to take you somewhere safe while we...
No.
The single word stopped him mid-reach. He turned to find Diana standing now, the blanket fallen to the floor, her small hands clenched into fists at her sides. I want to wait here. I want to wait for you to bring her back. Diana, that's not.
Please.
Her voice cracked. I can't go somewhere else. I can't be with strangers right now. I just want to wait here for my mama. Alex glanced at Mrs. Kowalski, who gave him a small nod. The apartment was secure. Diana would be safe. He could allow this small mercy. All right, he said. But you do exactly what Mrs. Kowalski tells you. Understood. Diana nodded, but she didn't move. She stood there staring at him with those enormous eyes that had somehow seen too much and still held desperately onto hope. Then, before he could prepare himself, she crossed the room and grabbed his hand with both of hers. Her hands were so small they barely wrapped around his fingers. He could feel them trembling. Promise you'll bring her back, Diana whispered, and tears began streaming down her face again. Promise me. Please. Promise. Alex froze. He was a man who'd built an empire on certainty and control. A man who calculated risks and managed outcomes. A man who never, ever made promises he couldn't guarantee to keep. Promises were liabilities. Promises were weaknesses. Promises gave people power over you. He'd learned that lesson the hard way, kneeling beside his mother's grave, remembering every promise she'd made about their future together. Promises meant nothing when the world was cruel and random and people you loved could be ripped away in an instant. Diana, he started, his voice careful. I'm going to do everything.
No. She squeezed. No.
She squeezed his hand harder, her grip surprisingly strong for someone so small. Not everything I can. Not I'll try. Promise. Say the words. Promise you'll bring my mama home. Alex looked down at this child who'd burst into his world and shattered his carefully constructed walls. This little girl who'd run through the dark city streets to find a monster because she had nowhere else to turn. Who'd looked at the most dangerous man she could find and begged him to be her hero. Behind him, he could hear Dominic's voice in the stairwell, calling up that they were ready to move. The team was waiting. Every second of delay reduced their tactical advantage. But Alex didn't move. He knelt down slowly, bringing himself to Diana's eye level just as he had hours ago in the restaurant. Her tears were falling freely now, dropping onto his tactical vest, and her entire body shook with the effort of holding herself together. I promise, Alex said quietly, and the words felt like stepping off a cliff into unknown darkness. I promise I'll bring your mama back to you. Diana's face crumpled with relief and renewed fear all at once. She threw her arms around his neck, holding on with desperate strength. "Thank you," she sobbed into his shoulder. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." Alex awkwardly patted her back, and used to this kind of contact, this kind of raw emotion. Over Diana's shoulder, he saw Mrs. Kowalski watching with suspiciously bright eyes. "I have to go now," he said gently, easing Diana back. "The sooner I leave, the sooner I can bring her home." Diana nodded and stepped back, wiping her face with her sleeve. She looked so small standing there in her torn green dress, surrounded by the trappings of his violent world, the weapons cabinet, the surveillance monitors, the maps marked with territories and operations. Alex stood and walked to the door, but paused at the threshold. He turned back one last time. "Diana, your mother is lucky to have you." Then he was gone, descending the stairs to where his team waited. But everything had changed. The mission parameters were the same. The tactical approach was identical. The risks hadn't diminished. But it wasn't just a rescue operation anymore. It was a promise. And Alex had just learned what every parent knows and what he'd forgotten long ago, that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is promise a child you'll keep them safe. Because once you make that promise, failure isn't just unacceptable. It's unthinkable. The fish processing plant loomed against the pre-dawn sky like a monument to decay. Rusted metal siding, broken windows, the skeletal remains of industrial equipment jutting from the roof. It looked abandoned, forgotten, exactly what the vultures wanted people to think. But Alex could see the signs. Fresh tire tracks in the gravel. Security cameras disguised as broken fixtures. The faint glow of light from windows that should have been dark. This place was very much alive. The convoy had parked half a mile back, approaching the final distance on foot through the maze of shipping containers and abandoned warehouses that surrounded Pier 17. Alex's team moved like shadows, 12 men in black tactical gear, weapons ready, communications equipment crackling softly with status updates. Thermal imaging shows 8 heat signatures on the ground floor. Marcus's voice crackled through Alex's earpiece. He was monitoring from a mobile command center, hacking into the Vulture's security system in real time. 3 more on the second level. "I'm reading multiple signatures in the basement. That's where they're keeping the captives." "Patrol patterns?" Dominic whispered, crouched beside Alex behind a rusted crane. 2 guards doing perimeter walks. 1 stationed at the main entrance. The rest are inside. Alex checked his watch. 4:03. In 17 minutes, the sky would start lightning. They needed to be inside before then. He raised his fist, the signal. His team split into 2 groups with practice precision. Dominic's extraction team circled left, heading for the loading dock entrance that Marcus had identified as their best route to the basement. Alex's assault team moved right, toward the main entrance, where the guard stood smoking a cigarette, oblivious to the death approaching from the darkness. The guard never heard them coming. Vincent moved like liquid shadow, and within seconds the man was unconscious, zip-tied, and dragged behind a dumpster. Alex's team slipped through the door he'd been guarding. The interior was worse than the outside, a gutted industrial nightmare of concrete floors, exposed pipes, and rooms that had once processed thousands of pounds of fish daily. Now it processed human cargo. Alex could smell it. Fear, sweat, desperation soaked into the walls. They moved through the first corridor in tactical formation. 2 guards appeared around a corner, laughing about something, completely unprepared. The suppressed shots from Alex's team were nearly silent. Both men dropped before they could raise an alarm. "Ground floor secured," Alex whispered into his mic, moving to secondary position. "Copy that," Dominic responded. "We've reached the basement level. Heavy door, electronic lock." "Marcus."
On it.
"Give me 30 seconds." But they didn't have 30 seconds. An alarm shrieked through the building. Someone had found the guards. The element of surprise was gone. "Change of plans," Alex barked. Fast and loud. "Go, go, go." The assault team surged forward. Guards poured from doorways and Alex's men met them with controlled aggression. The sound of gunfire echoed through the cavernous space, muzzle flashes strobing in the dim light. Alex moved through the chaos with lethal efficiency. 2 shots, center mass, a guard dropped. Pivot, assess, engage. Another guard down. His team was outnumbered, but vastly superior in training and discipline. The Vulture's men were street thugs playing soldier. Alex's men were soldiers who happened to work outside the law. Basement door breached. Dominic's voice cut through the noise. "We're going in." Alex's team pushed deeper into the facility, clearing rooms with mechanical precision. They found evidence of the Vulture's operations everywhere: forged documents, restraints, stacks of cash, surveillance photos of potential targets. This wasn't just a holding facility. This was their entire local headquarters. They were destroying it room by room. A guard emerged from a stairwell, weapon raised. Alex fired first. The man crumpled, and Alex was already moving past him, ascending the stairs 3 at a time. Marcus had indicated heat signatures on the 2nd floor, likely command and control.
He was right.
Alex burst through a door to find an office with multiple monitors showing security feeds, communication equipment, and maps of the city marked with potential targets. 2 men scrambled for weapons. Neither made it. "Boss, you need to see this." Dominic's voice was tight with controlled rage. Alex descended to the basement level, following the sound of his second-in-command's voice. The stairs led to a concrete corridor lined with heavy doors, the kind designed to muffle screams. Dominic's team had forced them all open. Women emerged blinking into the harsh fluorescent light. Some looked defiant despite their fear. Others appeared broken, hollow-eyed, beyond hope. 12 in total, just as Paolo had said. Ages ranging from late teens to mid-40s. Different ethnicities, different backgrounds, united only by their shared nightmare. Alex's men were already distributing water, blankets, speaking in calm tones designed to reassure. These women had been through hell. The last thing they needed was more fear. "Last cell," Dominic said quietly, gesturing to the end of the corridor. Alex walked past the other cells, past the freed captives who watched this tattooed man with weapons and blood on his tactical vest, unsure if he was savior or another monster. He reached the final door, still closed, still locked from the outside. He threw the bolt and pulled it open. Joyce Wright sat in the corner, knees drawn to her chest, face bruised and swollen, one eye nearly shut. Her clothes were torn, her hands bound with zip ties, dried blood on her temple. But she was breathing. She was alive. When she saw Alex, she flinched, pressing herself harder against the wall. "Joyce Wright?" Alex asked, his voice gentler than it had been all night. She nodded, terrified, trembling. "My name is Alex. Your daughter Diana sent me." He knelt slowly, non-threateningly. "She's safe. She's waiting for you. I'm here to take you home." Joyce's face crumpled. She started to sob, the kind of broken, exhausted crying that comes when terror finally breaks. "Diana? She's okay? She's really okay." "She's perfect," Alex said, pulling a knife to cut her restraints. "Brave as hell, actually. She ran halfway across the city to find me. Wouldn't take no for an answer." The zip ties fell away, and Joyce pulled her hands to her chest, rubbing circulation back into her wrists. "I told her to hide. I told her to stay inside and lock the door. I was so afraid they'd take her too." "She's her mother's daughter," Alex said, helping Joyce to her feet. She swayed, unsteady, and he supported her weight.
"Come on.
Let's get you out of here." They emerged from the cell to find the corridor transformed. Dominic's team had turned it into a makeshift triage area. The freed women were being assessed, treated for minor injuries, wrapped in thermal blankets. Vincent was on his phone, arranging transport and medical care. Joyce looked at the other women, recognition and horror crossing her face. "They were going to sell us," she whispered. "They said tomorrow night we'd be gone forever." "Not anymore," Alex said simply. Upstairs, gunfire had ceased. His assault team had secured the facility. The Vulture's operation was finished. But Alex's promise was kept. Alex was escorting Joyce toward the exit when the radio on his vest crackled. "Boss, we got a situation." Main hall, north side. You're going to want to see this. He handed Joyce off to one of Dominic's men with instructions to get her outside and into the medical transport. Then he moved through the gutted facility toward the main processing floor, a cavernous space that still smelled faintly of fish and salt water despite decades of disuse. Victor Kane stood in the center of the room, like he owned it. He was younger than Alex expected, maybe 40, with silver streaking his dark hair and a face that might have been handsome if not for the cruelty in his eyes. He wore an expensive suit despite the hour, completely out of place in this industrial hellscape. 3 of his men flanked him, weapons drawn but held low, a gesture that said they knew they were outgunned but weren't ready to surrender. Alex's team had them surrounded, rifles trained, fingers on triggers. One word from Alex, and Kane would be Swiss cheese. But Kane was smiling. "You must be Alex," Kane said, his voice smooth, cultured, with just a hint of an accent Alex couldn't quite place. "The famous king of the city. I've heard so much about you." "Can't say the same," Alex replied, stopping 15 feet away. His weapon remained holstered, a calculated insult that said he didn't consider Kane threat enough to bother drawing on. Kane's smile widened, but his eyes went cold. "You've made quite the mess here tonight. Killed my men, freed my inventory, destroyed months of work. Do you have any idea what this is going to cost me? Less than what it's going to cost you if you don't leave my city." "Your city?" Kane laughed, the sound echoing off concrete walls. "You don't own the city, Alex. You're just a local gangster playing pretend. This is the 21st century. The real players operate internationally, move products worth millions, have connections that reach into governments and corporations. You're small time. A relic." Alex's expression didn't change, but something in his stillness made Kane's men shift nervously. "You did all this for one worthless witness," Kane continued, gesturing at the carnage around them. "Started a war, risked everything you've built, put your own men in danger. All for a florist who was in the wrong place at the wrong time. That's not business. That's emotion. And emotion is weakness." "You're right about one thing," Alex said quietly. "I did risk everything tonight." Kane's smile turned triumphant, like he'd won some philosophical argument. "She's not a witness," Alex continued, taking a single step forward. "She's a mother. And that little girl is waiting for her to come home." The smile vanished from Kane's face. "See, that's your problem, Victor. You look at people and see inventory, products, assets to be moved and sold. You see a woman and calculate her market value." Alex's voice remained perfectly calm, but everyone in the room could feel the temperature drop. "I look at that same woman and see a daughter who needs her. I see a flower shop that serves the neighborhood. I see someone who works hard and hurts no one and deserves to feel safe in her own city." "How touching," Kane sneered. "The gangster with a heart of gold." "No," Alex said. "Not gold. Just standards. There are rules in this world, Victor. Lines that separate criminals from monsters. We might break the law. We might hurt people who know what they're getting into, but we don't prey on civilians. We don't terrorize mothers and daughters. We don't turn human beings into commodities. Those rules are outdated. Sentimental nonsense from a dying era. Then consider this a lesson in tradition." Alex's hand moved to his weapon now, drawing it with practiced ease. "You came into my city. You operated without permission. You took someone under my protection. You didn't even know she existed until tonight. And you made the mistake of thinking I wouldn't care." Alex raised his weapon, aimed it steadily at Kane's chest. "I want you to understand something very clearly. This isn't about territory or money or respect. This is about the fact that a 7-year-old girl cried in my restaurant tonight. She begged me to save her mother, and I made her a promise." Kane's confidence was cracking now, his eyes darting to his men, calculating odds. "You can't kill me. I have connections. Partners who will come looking. You do this, and you'll have cartels breathing down your neck." "Let them come," Alex said simply. "And they can learn the same lesson you're about to learn. That some things matter more than business. That some promises are worth keeping regardless of cost. That this city has a king, and he doesn't tolerate monsters." "Wait," The shot was clean. Center mass. Kane dropped to his knees, eyes wide with shock, hands clutching his chest. His men raised their weapons but froze when a dozen rifles swung to target them. "Drop them," Dominic commanded. "Now." The weapons clattered to the concrete. Kane was still alive, gasping, blood spreading across his expensive shirt. Alex walked forward until he stood directly over him. "The rest of your operation is finished," Alex said, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. "Your facilities are being raided as we speak. Your accounts are being frozen. Your contacts are being warned that associating with the Vultures is now grounds for immediate retaliation. And every law enforcement agency that took your bribes is about to receive comprehensive evidence of your activities." Kane tried to speak but only managed a wet, choking sound. "You wanted to operate in my city?" Alex knelt down, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "You should have asked permission. You should have followed the rules. Most importantly, you should never, ever have taken someone's mother." He stood and walked away, leaving Kane bleeding on the floor. "Burn it," Alex ordered. "Burn the whole place down. I want nothing left but ash and a message." Within minutes, his team had planted accelerants throughout the facility. The freed women were safely loaded into vehicles, Joyce among them. The evidence Marcus needed had been photographed and digitally preserved. As Alex's convoy pulled away from Pier 17, the first flames were already visible through the shattered windows. By the time emergency services arrived, the old fish processing plant would be nothing but a smoking ruin. And the Vulture's operation in the city would be history. The private medical facility was located in a brownstone that looked like any other residential building on the quiet street. But behind its ordinary facade was a fully equipped trauma center where Alex's organization treated injuries that couldn't be explained in traditional hospitals. Gunshot wounds, knife injuries, interrogation casualties. The doctors here had seen everything and asked nothing. Joyce was in the primary treatment room, lying on a hospital bed while Dr. Patel worked methodically to assess her injuries. 2 broken ribs, a concussion, extensive bruising, and lacerations that would need stitches. Painful, but nothing life-threatening. She'd been lucky, if such a word could apply to her situation. Alex stood outside the treatment room watching through the observation window as the medical team worked. Dawn had broken an hour ago, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink that seemed obscenely beautiful after the night's violence. He still wore his tactical gear, though he'd removed the vest. His hands were clean now, the blood washed away, but he could still feel the weight of the weapon, still see Kane dropping to his knees.
He felt nothing about that.
No remorse, no satisfaction, just the empty calculation of a problem solved. "She's stable," Dr. Patel said, emerging from the treatment room and pulling off his gloves. "The ribs will heal in 6 weeks. The concussion is mild. Psychologically, she's remarkably resilient, but I'd recommend counseling. Trauma like this doesn't just disappear." Alex nodded. "Whatever she needs. Send the bills to Dominic." "There's someone else who needs to see her," Dr. Patel said gently. "I believe there's a young lady in the waiting room who's been very patient." Diana had been sitting in the facility's waiting area for the past 90 minutes, Mrs. Kowalski beside her, holding her hand. When Alex appeared in the doorway, Diana shot to her feet, her eyes desperate with hope and fear. "Is she?" "She's alive," Alex said, and watched the little girl's entire body sag with relief. "She's hurt, but she's going to be fine." Dr. Patel fixed her up. "You can see her now." Diana didn't wait for further permission. She bolted past Alex toward the treatment room, her small feet pattering against the tile floor. Alex followed at a measured pace, giving them a moment. When he reached the doorway, the reunion was already happening. Diana had climbed onto the bed, carefully, so carefully, and wrapped her arms around her mother's neck. Joyce was crying, one arm around her daughter, the other hand stroking Diana's hair with trembling fingers. The words tumbled out between sobs, overlapping, incoherent. "I was so scared, and I thought I lost you, and you're safe now, and I love you so much." Alex stood in the doorway, watching this moment that belonged entirely to them. He should have left, given them privacy, but something held him there. Maybe it was the need to confirm that his promise had been kept. Maybe it was something else, something he couldn't name. Joyce looked up and saw him standing there. Her bruised face was wet with tears, but her eyes held something fierce and grateful. "You," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Diana told me.
You saved me.
You came for me." Alex didn't respond, just remained still in the doorway. "Why?" Joyce asked, and the question carried weight beyond the simple word. "Why would you risk everything for someone you don't even know?" Diana said she glanced at her daughter, choosing her words carefully. "She said you're an important man. Dangerous. Why would someone like you care about someone like me?" The room fell silent except for the quiet beeping of the heart monitor. Diana turned to look at Alex too, waiting for an answer she'd probably wondered about herself. Alex's jaw tightened. He could have given her a dozen answers. Could have explained about his mother, about the parallels, about old debts and older wounds. Could have told her about the code he lived by, about lines that shouldn't be crossed, about the difference between criminals and monsters. But he didn't. Instead, he watched Diana's small hand clutch her mother's, watched the way Joyce held her daughter like she'd never let go, watched this moment of reunion that existed because he'd chosen to act instead of looking away. And for the first time in years, maybe since he was 12 years old watching his own mother disappear into a black van, Alex felt something other than emptiness. He felt purpose.
He felt rightness.
He felt like the boy he'd been before the world taught him that caring was weakness and emotion was liability. "Get some rest," Alex said quietly, not answering her question. "Both of you. You're safe now. That's all that matters." He turned to leave, but Diana's voice stopped him. "Uncle Alex?" He looked back. Diana was smiling at him through her tears, her face pressed against her mother's shoulder, looking more at peace than any 7-year-old should have to feel after what she'd been through. "Thank you for keeping your promise." Alex nodded once, then walked away, leaving mother and daughter to their reunion. In the hallway, Dominic was waiting with an update report. "The Meridian Star has been seized by customs. Anonymous tip about human trafficking. The Port Authority is tearing it apart. The other Vultures facilities we hit are all secured. We recovered files, ledgers, everything Marcus needs to feed to the authorities." "Good," Alex said. "What about Kane's contacts?"
Scattered.
"Without leadership and with their operation exposed, most of them are already running. The ones who aren't smart enough to run will be dealt with." Alex looked back through the observation window one last time. Diana had fallen asleep on the bed beside her mother, exhausted by fear and relief. Joyce was awake, staring at the ceiling, one hand still holding her daughter close. "Make sure they have protection," Alex said. 24-hour surveillance on their apartment, security at the flower shop, the works. "I want to know if anyone even looks at them wrong." Dominic raised an eyebrow. "Long term?"
Permanent.
"Boss, you know this changes things. Word will get out about what you did tonight. Every desperate person in the city is going to—" "Let them," Alex interrupted. "Let them know that in this city, there are still rules. That mothers and children are off limits. That monsters like the Vultures don't get to operate here." He walked toward the exit, suddenly exhausted beyond measure. Behind him, Dominic smiled slightly. His boss had just declared war on every human trafficker within 100 miles. Had just painted a target on his own back. Had just chosen compassion over calculation. And Dominic couldn't have been prouder. Underscore 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 underscore. Before you click away, I need you to understand something. The Vultures in this story, Victor Kane and his organization, they're not just fiction. Right now, as you're watching this, real trafficking rings operate in the shadows of every major city. Real mothers are taken. Real children are left crying with nowhere to turn. And they count on one thing: your silence. Your scrolling past. Your decision that someone else will handle it. But here's the truth. Awareness is a weapon. Every subscription to this channel, every share, every comment spreads the message that we're watching, that we won't look away, that monsters like the vultures can't hide when people refuse to ignore the problem. So hit that subscribe button right now. Not for me, for every Joyce right out there who needs people to care. Like this video.
Share it.
Comment below if you believe that protecting the innocent matters more than staying comfortable. Because the vultures of the world, they're betting you won't. Prove them wrong. Spring had transformed the city into something almost hopeful. Cherry blossoms lined the streets of Riverside District, petals drifting on warm breezes, and Joyce's flowers occupied a corner storefront with floor-to-ceiling windows that let in golden afternoon light. The new location was 3 times the size of the old shop, in a neighborhood where mothers walked their children home from school without looking over their shoulders. The lease was under a shell company's name, the security system was state-of-the-art, and 2 of Alex's men in plain clothes rotated shifts nearby, watching for threats that would never materialize. Joyce had chosen not to ask too many questions about the arrangements. She understood now who Alex was, what he represented, the violence he was capable of. She'd seen enough that night to understand the kind of power he wielded. But she'd also seen him kneel before her terrified daughter and make a promise that most men wouldn't have kept. The black Mercedes pulled up outside the shop at precisely 3:15, the same time it did every other Saturday. Diana had been watching for it, her nose pressed against the window, and the moment the car door opened, she was already running. "Uncle Alex," she shouted, bursting through the shop door and launching herself at him with complete faith that he'd catch her. He did, scooping her up with an ease that had developed over 6 months of these Saturday visits. She'd grown since that terrible November night, taller, healthier, her face fuller and her eyes brighter. The trauma hadn't vanished. Dr. Chen, the therapist Alex had arranged, said it might never completely disappear, but Diana had found her way back to childhood joy. "You have to see what Mama made," Diana said, already wiggling to get down and grab his hand. Come on, it's so pretty." Alex let himself be dragged into the shop, nodding to Joyce, who stood behind the counter arranging white roses. She smiled at him, that knowing smile that said she saw through his dangerous reputation to something more complicated underneath. The shop was thriving. Word had spread about Joyce's artistry, and this safer location brought customers who actually had money to spend. Wedding arrangements, corporate events, sympathy bouquets. The orders kept coming. She'd even hired an assistant, a young woman named Teresa, who reminded Alex uncomfortably of the other women they'd freed that night. He'd helped place most of them in new lives, jobs, apartments, counseling, fresh starts funded by the vultures' seized assets. Teresa had chosen to work with flowers. Something about creating beauty after surviving horror. "Look," Diana pointed to an elaborate arrangement in the window, cascading orchids and lilies arranged in a pattern that seemed to defy gravity. "Mama made it for the mayor's daughter's wedding." "The mayor? Isn't that cool?" "Very cool," Alex agreed, though he found himself more interested in Diana's enthusiasm than the flowers themselves. "And look what I made at school." Diana released his hand to dart behind the counter, emerging with a carefully rolled piece of construction paper. "Mrs. Henderson said to draw our family. Want to see?" She didn't wait for an answer, unrolling the paper with pride. 3 stick figures held hands across a background of scribbled green grass and blue sky. On the left, a figure with long brown hair and a dress, clearly Joyce. On the right, a taller figure with dark hair. Diana had even attempted to draw the serpent tattoo as a squiggly line on the neck. In the middle, smaller than both, a little girl with a huge smile. Above the drawing, in Diana's careful 7-year-old handwriting, "My family." Alex stared at that paper longer than he should have. 3 stick figures holding hands.
Such a simple drawing.
Such an impossible statement. He was a criminal. A killer. A man whose hands had ended lives and would likely end more. His world was built on violence and fear and moral compromises that would horrify most people. He'd never be truly clean, never be truly good, never be the kind of person who belonged in a child's drawing of family. But Diana had drawn him anyway. "Do you like it?" Diana asked, suddenly uncertain. mistaking his silence for disapproval. I can make another one if. I love it, Alex said, and his voice came out rougher than he intended. Can I keep it? Diana's face lit up. Really? You want to keep my drawing?
Ido.
Then it's yours. She carefully rolled it back up and handed it to him like she was presenting a treasure. You can put it in your office. Then when you're doing important business stuff, you can look at it and remember us. Joyce had moved closer, watching this exchange with suspicion-bright eyes. Stay for dinner, she said quietly.
Please.
It's just pasta, nothing fancy, but Diana's been asking all week if you'd stay this time. Alex had never stayed for dinner. He visited on Saturdays, brought gifts sometimes, books for Diana, specialty supplies for Joyce's shop, things he claimed to have excess of, but he never stayed longer than 30 minutes. Never let himself get too comfortable in this world that wasn't his. But Diana was looking up at him with hope in her eyes, and Joyce was smiling that knowing smile, and he was holding a stick figure drawing labeled "My Family," like it was something precious. Pasta sounds good, Alex heard himself say. Diana cheered and immediately started chattering about setting the table and how Uncle Alex could sit in the special chair by the window. Joyce squeezed his arm gently as she passed, a gesture of gratitude and acceptance, and something that felt dangerously like affection. They closed the shop early and went upstairs to the apartment above, another property Alex's organization owned, another arrangement Joyce had chosen not to question too carefully. The space was bright and safe, filled with Diana's artwork and Joyce's books, and the warm smell of garlic bread. Over dinner, Diana told elaborate stories about school, about her friends, about the class hamster that escaped and was found sleeping in someone's backpack. Joyce talked about an order for a golden wedding anniversary, 50 years of marriage, and how the husband had cried when he saw the arrangement. And Alex sat at their table, eating pasta, listening to their ordinary, beautiful lives, and felt something he'd thought died 20 years ago in an alley behind a seamstress shop. He felt like he belonged. He was still a criminal, still dangerous, still the tattooed king who made hardened men look away. His world was still built on violence and power and moral lines most people would never cross. But he was also Uncle Alex. He was also the man who kept promises to desperate little girls. He was also someone who got to sit at this table and be part of something good. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Maybe redemption didn't mean erasing who you were. Maybe it meant becoming someone worth remembering for the right reasons. Diana handed him another drawing before he left that evening, this one showing him and her holding ice cream cones. For next Saturday, she said. So, you don't forget to come back. As if he could ever forget. As if he'd ever want to. Underscore 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 underscore. If this story moved you, don't just feel it, do something about it. Subscribe to this channel. Share this video. Because stories like this remind us that even in the darkest places, even from the most unlikely people, compassion can emerge. And the world needs more of that.
Click subscribe.
Be part of something that matters.